Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Happy Monday, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah.
We have information to share that I learned at a conference. It was really interesting, and we thought, we should share it with our preschool peeps and begin to think about how this informs our practices going forward with young children. And here's what I attended a conference. You know, I'm always learning, like the people listening to this podcast are always learning. And I was really interested in the sessions in this conference because they talked about the next steps in early education, having lived through this past year of what we've all been through and what that might be like. And one of the pieces of data that they shared showed that children who were able to have one-to-one connections with their teachers and or therapists, if they have IEPs and special education services and have therapists, kids who were able to have those one-to-one connections and had follow-up with their families on what was being done, like maybe schoolwork was being sent home, for example, or families were in tune with what was happening online with their kids during online sessions, they actually really thrived. And in a lot of ways in their development, they are ahead of where we would expect them to be at their current age, which is so interesting because I think a lot of the talk, and honestly, a lot of the talk you and I have done, Alison, has been about learning gaps and learning loss and look at how much children are losing. But with certain kinds of attention over the past year, and especially from last March through last summer, the children pulled ahead.
Yeah, I find this so fascinating.
It's so interesting. And I was talking to teachers that I talk to monthly for one of my clients. So I was just sharing with them that this is what I learned at this conference. And the teacher said to me, well, that's absolutely right. She said, I have a few students who I met with and continue to meet with one-on-one, even though they're still learning at home. Their parents are really in tune to what's happening, and they're ahead of the kids who are live with me in class. I'm not going to lie. And I was like, look at that.
100% correct. Okay, so I'm in the same boat as that teacher. I have 3 home learners, and the rest are at school. And my home learners are a lot further ahead. And I think it's because they have someone right next to them throughout every single lesson that can one-on-one talk them through it. And if they hit a little snag of like, hey, I don't understand it, boom, it's like immediate attention, you know, whereas sometimes when you're in that whole group, you're afraid to raise your hand. I don't understand, you know, and you kind of can slip through a little bit.
They could feel insecure in the large group and actually be trying emerging skills faster.
Yes.
When they're not in the large group all the time.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that you've experienced
the same
fascinating
thing. The same exact thing. And even I have one home learner that he struggles a little bit with certain things. So sometimes I'll hop on with just him and then it's just me and him and he's online and he's home and his mom's like, I'm going to go in the other room and it's just going to be you guys. And anytime I have a little session like that with him, his mom says for like a week, he's on a high, like he's ready to learn. He wants to do it because he got a little like pep talk. He got a little one-on-one time and he feels so like lost sometimes with, you know, with all the home learners on this big screen. And then there's, you know, other kids at school and just getting that FaceTime with somebody means a lot. She goes, even though he sees me all day, you know, it's not the same as getting one-on-one time with your teacher.
Yeah. You know, there's something to be said for that. I also think that what this speaks to, you know, listen, we can't control the lives of families and what prevents them from being that involved with the learning of their children. Families are busy and crazed right now. And there's lots of reasons why some families are more or less involved than others. And that's, I really believe, not for anyone to judge. As somebody who's a parent, I can tell you that over the course of my children's childhoods, there were times when I was more involved with what was going on with them and less. And there were all sorts of circumstances having to do with that, including the fact that when my children were very little, my father was terminally ill. and passed away, but he was terminally ill for more than 2 years. Like that really impacted the amount of time that I could spend you're sort of being torn between what's happening. And I'm just using that as an example because we never really know what is tearing people and what is making them not spend that time. But I'll tell you what this does speak to, the fact that children have never gotten enough one-to-one time. And I think that we need to take that into consideration as we start to move forward, but continue to build the wheel together, right? We're still kind of building the plane as we fly it, because now we're going to get children who only know pandemic era, and we're going to have to figure out how to adjust education. So I think as we do this, we need to take into consideration not only things like who's struggling with gaps in their social emotional development or their learning, but who thrived. And what does that tell us? It tells us we need to be spending more one-to-one time with them.
Yeah.
If you have a high quality schedule, there are a couple of times a day in the preschool years, especially, when you can spend a lot of one-to-one connecting time with students. And those times of day are small group time, when you're working with them in small groups and you're sitting with them and interacting with them in a more one-on-one way than you can do with a whole class.
Yeah.
Another time is their free play time. It's another reason why free choice, and we've said this so many times on this podcast, has to be 60 uninterrupted minutes. And I'm not bringing you over to a table to do something with me. I'm going to go and talk to you about what you're interested in. And I'm going to spend that time teaching you based on what you're doing in a more one-to-one or one-to very few kind of way, you know? I think it speaks to, again, the importance of those times of day. I also think we're going to have to further prioritize free choice moving forward in early education, because there are gaps in socialization. Think about the kids who aren't in our settings yet because they're not age eligible for our settings, but all they know is pandemic era. So they have not spent time necessarily with people like neighbors and play dates and cousins, the way prior generations had. So these times of day become even, I think, more important. Now you work with, Alison, you work with kindergartners. So I don't know what opportunities you have in the course of your day.
It's hard because we don't even really have small group time anymore, because in my school they're at desks still from pandemic world, but they don't really know any different, I guess. So what I've been doing just recently, I started doing this, is I'll actually take some of them out of the classroom, sometimes just two, or sometimes just one, and it's just me and the other student. I take them into this empty room, this empty classroom we have, and we talk about stuff. Sometimes usually it stems from like, hey, we're struggling with this math concept. You come with me, we'll eat lunch together. Let's talk about that. And then we wind up being in there for a half hour, and now we're just talking about life. And then I noticed that when I do that and I give them tips in that little one-on-one section, it sinks in better. And then when they get in the classroom, they're like, Miss Alison, I did that thing you told me about at lunch, you know? And it's like, oh, good. Did it work? Yes, it worked. And now I have this like I have this relationship with them so that we can talk about not just academic stuff, but life in general, you know? And that's what I do during my little one-on-one lunch sessions.
So you might say to a student, you know, you're struggling with the math. Why don't you have lunch with me? And and don't you think that we do that though? I remember all the way through high school and college, instructors or teachers or professors saying, you seem to be struggling with this. Do you want to spend a little time with me? But it was always based on whatever you're struggling with.
Right.
So I think the question going forward is, really, should we be intentionally planning one-to-one time with children, both at home and at school? And our next episode, folks, we're going to talk about a system for doing that. So stay tuned or come back or whatever you call it, because in our next episode, I think what we're going to do is dive more deeply into purposefully planning certain types of one-to-one time with children. In this episode, I really just wanted to give the notion that when we're planning our schedules and when we're thinking about our curriculums and our educational day, you know, even the children that you work with, Alison, who are older than some of the people who listen, they're in kindergarten, they're in, you know, they're like getting to be school age and all that stuff. We still need to do it with them. That's the point. We all do better when we have one-to-one connections, and all learning stems from relationship. And I don't know why, we know that, I think, in the preschool years that we have to
I
develop
think we
these
know it.
relationships. And then they'll hit kindergarten and all of a sudden it's not prioritized.
It's yeah. Yeah. It's like a whole group. Well, it used to be whole group or small group instruction, I guess. Now we don't even really get small groups all that often because
But
of
it's
COVID,
that
which
you
is
said
sad.
that's because of COVID, right? That's
Because of COVID. Yeah, not because that's not the way we normally would do things, but because of COVID, it's hard to get them. And even in my class, I still am like, we're going to partner read, but you're just going to have to keep your distance, and they love it because they're getting almost like one-on-one time, but with another student. So like, I feel like sometimes the one-on-one time doesn't always have to be with me. Sometimes they just want, like they just want to be out of that large group and they want to be in their own little pod. And I let them do that as long as they can safely do so, but I feel like once I started with a couple students who were struggling and I realized like, wow, this really works. It made me realize how important it was to do it with all of them, whether they're struggling or not, to like, even just be like, hey, for 10 minutes, we're going to go take a walk around the school and it's just going to be me and you.
Okay.
And you know what
realistically,
I mean?
but realistically, how much time do you have to do something like that in a kindergarten day?
I had to give up a lot of my time to do it.
You don't. Well, again, we're going to talk more about systems for this in the next episode.
Yeah. That kind of time is not built into the schedule.
No, it's not built in.
And I think it needs to be. Yeah.
I wonder though, going forward, if more attention will be paid to schedules from kindergarten up.
Yeah.
And in preschools, please, for goodness sake, we have worked for so long, some of us, to get people to de-emphasize large group activities and emphasize free choice and small group. And still, I speak to so many people who are just unaware of that. When I do trainings and I say to them, the most important times of your day in an early childhood setting are free choice and small group, I still get people on the call who are like, but what about my large group meeting? My morning meeting is so important. And I'm like, yeah, no, it really isn't. But the people who listen to this podcast have heard me say that before.
Yeah.
You would be amazed at how many people I've never heard anybody say that.
Yeah.
And I find it like a little disturbing, especially with this data coming out.
I know. I'm amazed by this data because so many people are so worried about the gap, the learning loss and all this stuff. And it's like, well, wait, here we are. Mm-hmm. And it does exist. I'm not saying it doesn't, but there's also people who are closing that gap, and it's all from that one-on-one time, that they're getting. So there is like this large range, I guess, of what's going on during the lockdown.
There is. We also need to take into consideration, so to give the people who listen to us steadily kind of a preview, in upcoming episodes, we're going to be talking about how can we do this. We're also going to be talking about some things we might want to do if you work in a summer program. Summer program. If the children are participating in summer programs, things to look for. If you run a summer program or teach in a summer program for early learners, things that you may want to consider doing this summer, maybe a little differently than you've done in the past. Can still be fun, but I think it needs to be a little different. Listen, we're not going back. Time doesn't go back. Time only goes forward with what we've learned. And look at this amazing thing that we've learned, that those children are ahead, that teachers are agreeing that they're ahead. So very interesting. And part of that puzzle, as I said, is figuring out for families where it's not possible for whatever reason to spend that sort of time with their children. How can we fill in that gap in our settings? Because really we should be working in partnership with families. And when one partner struggles, the other partner picks up. If you're a true partnership.
If you're a true partner. Yeah.
Right. If you're really a partner, you complement each other in that way, and you don't judge each other, but you say, okay, I hear you. I know that you have a situation where maybe you can't spend that much time with this one child. And so let's talk about what I may be able to do in school. I think that has to become part of our conversations. How much, I wish families would go when they're touring places, especially when they're picking out preschools, and say, how much one-on-one time do your teachers spend with my kids?
Make
my
that
kid.
part of your little preschool checklist.
Yeah. How much
You know?
one-on-one time do they get to spend with the children, and what does that look like? Because it
Yeah.
shouldn't look like, as you well know from being a preschool peep of ours, it
Yeah.
shouldn't look like we're all going to cut out the same identical penguin or snowman. It should
Right.
look like we're having intentional interactions as the
Yeah.
children do things that interest them, and here's when we do it. So I
Yeah.
think maybe the focus of this episode is more like, okay, let's all think now. What questions can we ask where our children go for their early childhood experience,
Yeah.
knowing that the one-to-one interactions made such a big difference?
Right.
What we have
What
to
can
start
I
to
do
think
as a
about,
teacher?
what can I do as a teacher?
Mhm.
What places in my schedule or my curriculum
Mhm.
should I be leaning toward and leaning
Right.
away from?
Yeah.
Right? Where do I lean away? Human beings, I don't remember if I said this in the last episode that we did, Allison, but it's a great sort of thing. Human beings can do several things really well, or try to do a whole bunch of things, and then it turns out kind of lousy. So
Yeah.
I think we need to know where to
Yeah.
prioritize. And I also heard this other really great phrase that we might want to talk about in the future as well, Allison. Look, she's gonna get her paper out now to write this down. And it's basically how do we create an early childhood education culture, which means both the staff and the children. How do we create a culture of growth and inquiry instead of products and perfectionism?
I love that topic. Thank you.
I can't take credit for the entire idea. I'm taking a postgraduate class, as I have mentioned, I think before.
Yeah.
And it was actually the instructor, the facilitator for that class. I put something in the discussion forum about respecting the process of learning versus products. And
Right.
she's the one who said, well, shouldn't the culture of the school, which includes staff and children, be basically inquiry and growth instead of products and perfectionism? Because when adults are leaning toward products and perfectionism, that's what we teach children to do. So again, little
Right.
sneak preview, that's a topic
Right.
for another episode. So if you've been listening to our podcast for a while, or you have binged us and you're feeling overloaded on us, no, stay with us. We have some really good topics coming up.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what people think of this notion, this knowledge. We weren't taught so one-to-one when we were kids, unless, like you said, Allison,
No, it was
right, like you were talking about, you're struggling, why don't you come and have lunch with me? And then as you get older, it becomes, you're struggling, why don't you meet me at this time
during
after
office
school?
hours. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In high school, it becomes, well, I give after school help. And then in college, it becomes, well, I have office hours.
Office hours. Yeah.
It shouldn't only be offered to those children.
Yeah, it should be for
or to those students. So
yeah,
I think what we'll do with this episode is sort of lay the foundation for our next episode and let people think about that.
Think about it. Yeah. What can you do?
What can you do
differently?
And if you're a parent listening to this, what can you do? What can you do to just spend a little more? And I'm not saying loads and loads. I know you're busy. Just a little more one-to-one time.
Yeah.
With the children. It's one of those things where I feel like every tiny little bit is going to be helpful to them.
Yeah.
Right. I wonder if now that society may open up a little more, this is what I wonder. Will families have more time for one-to-one time or less time for one-to-one time?
Ooh, I
don't even know.
I don't know. I don't know. We won't know because we're not there yet.
No, we're really not.
We're still on the little journey here. You know, we're not, the journey is not complete.
We're going to be on the little journey. We're going to be on this journey for quite some time.
While. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it may start to look different, but the journey is ongoing because we've changed.
That's what a journey is. It's constantly changing. It shouldn't look the same. You know, it's going to change. It should change, but we're still.
Honestly, I don't want to go back to February 2020. If what we're learning now is that we didn't spend enough one-to-one time with these kids.
Right.
There are some things I do not want to go back to. Back wasn't so great. I saw some memes about this on social media where it was like, don't look back, that wasn't so great. Look
that
what's
wasn't
happened
so
over this
great.
year. Yeah.
It wasn't so great. I
Yeah.
mean, people keep saying they want to go back to that normal. I'm like, yeah, no, I kind of don't.
It wasn't so great. I think
Yeah. You know,
there are things that could be improved, and shouldn't we take our experiences and make improvements?
yeah, that's what life is, right?
Right. And one of those improvements is going to be this. This is your homework, preschool peeps. We've never given homework before, have we?
Ooh,
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right.
Other
So
than to contact us.
here's your homework. Your
Yeah.
homework is to think about how you can embed more one-to-one time for all students in your day, either as a parent or as an educator or
Yeah.
homeschooling or whatever it is you do. How can you embed even more, up the ante from what you do? How can I embed even more one-to-one time with each of the children in my home or in my setting to increase the possibility that their skills are improving? And as we talked about, I believe in the last episode, all learning is intertwined.
Yes.
So if I spend more time just sitting and talking with you one-to-one, I'm also supporting the other parts of your brain and the other skills.
Yes.
So this episode sort of tags off that one. That's your homework. And if you think of something really cool, feel free to contact us.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And if you go to our website for that contact form, you know what you're going to find under listener resources?
Oh, all that cool stuff from last week. So if
You
you missed
are.
last week's episode, make sure you catch that. And then you could see those resources that we talk about, which were really phenomenal.
And we actually have gotten emails from people thanking us for the resources.
Yeah.
So
because
please go to the website.
Yeah. Yeah.
Truly. And
Yeah.
I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. I just know where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So howpreschoolteachersdoit.com, you can contact us through there. You can get the listener resources through there. And there's that resource and other resources.
Yeah, from past episodes. So you might have to go back and find the episode if you want to.
There's a bunch of fun. I didn't
That's
even put which episode they're related to so that you all can hunt.
Yeah, so that you're not just finding like episode 63. You're like, oh, I better listen to episode 60 through 90, and then maybe I'll find what I'm looking for, because all the episodes are so good. You know?
There you go. Because, we rock or something. Okay. We think we do.
we try.
We're going to let you go ponder that one-on-one time thing. And then we're going to gather again in this way next Monday and talk about some information for you to consider how that can be done, what that's called and how that can be done. We're going to leave you on a cliffhanger.
Leave him on the edge of my seat here, Cindy.
I feel like This Is Us or something. I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And now you're going to hope that the episode is, in fact, next week.
Yeah.
We wish you hope, as we always do.
Yeah.
And we will catch you next week.
Bye, peeps.
Bye, folks.